the agent possesses the power. Without doubt, the matters necessitating the resurrection of the dead exist. Also, the one who will bring it about is powerful to the utmost degree. There is no deficiency in his power. The greatest things and the smallest are the same in relation to his power. It is as easy for him to create the spring as to create a flower. Creating a spring is as easy as creating a flower. In other words, there is no gradation in his power, because weakness does not enter into his power. There is absolutely no gradation. In relation to his power, a flower, a star, and a galaxy are the same matter. Yes, one so powerful that this world together with all its suns, stars, worlds, particles, and substance bear witness to his sublimity and power with endless tongues. Does any doubt or misgiving have the right to consider bodily resurrection remote from such a power, and regard it as far from reason in relation with that power? In other words, all the details of the universe show that, in relation to that power, great and small are the same. In the face of such power, the issue of bodily resurrection remains a detail, his recreation, restoration, and bringing into existence, which he already demonstrates examples of on this planet. We didn't know about other planets before. At least now we can send satellites or make observations. But if we have hope of finding life on another planet, we are not expecting to find a spring there. I mean, right now, for there to be a spring on that planet. For instance, we might find a type of life on Mars, maybe 3 to 5 living beings. But there probably won't be seasons like spring, autumn, or winter there. I'm not saying that no life will be found. I'm not saying there won't be creatures like lobsters either. I'm not saying fossils past won't be found, but there won't be a spring. Spring is something unique to here, because this is the pinnacle of interpretation. In other words, it's the peak of interpretation. Everything that happens is to interpret the Quran. Or the Quran interprets what happens, but everything that happens on this planet is unique. That is, it is singular. It is unparalleled. Primarily, the issue of spring is to prove resurrection. It is an example to bring minds and hearts closer to this matter. People perceive spring in this way. In other words, the Earth's 23.5-degree tilt is essentially a grammatical rule of resurrection. That is, it's a grammatical rule of interpretation. So, it's not just a random 23.5 degrees. The issue of resurrection will be proven through it. That is, the grass will turn green again, flowers will gain color, the earth will come to life. Thus will be the resurrection, he says. In this way, you will also be brought out of your graves. In other words, with the same system, he says, right? That's why the earth indeed rotates according to spring. So to speak, according to the arrival of the spring season or the arrival of an autumn-winter season. The same cycle occurring in human life, in the life of states, in every tree you think of, or in every matter, whether living or non-living, in social entities, having a season of youth, a season of maturity, the decline of the season of old age, just like on this planet, in the matter we call the annual cycle of a planet. All the details related to the appearance of the 4 seasons are an interpretation. In other words, they are not just technical matters. Therefore, just as the Quran is the best explanation of the book of the universe, the book of the universe is best explained under the statement and perspective of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It is the book of the universe from that point of view. Otherwise, they are meaningless writings. Random matters. Just because a couple of letters come together, it turns into something nonsensical that people are happy about. However, they are all meaningful matters. When the book of the universe is read under the perspective of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, God has also desired it to be read under that perspective. But there are grammar rules for it to be read under this perspective. And today, we can perceive these grammar rules as science. In other words, science has explained this situation, from its geography, its biology, its astronomy, its physics. They are all grammar rules there. Every detail of the universe, or this planet, which is the exegesis of the Quran, explains a subject in the Quran. It supports or shows a clue. Conversely, if we may say so, if we look at it from this side, the Quran perfectly explains the book of the universe, under the correct perspective. At this point, let there be no scientific issue, no scientific topic, no grammar rule that is not under the name of exegesis. In other words, exegesis is a grammar rule. Without those grammar rules, these letters cannot be read meaningfully. Therefore, we need to know the sciences so that we can read meaningfully. For example, the master will now explain the power. He will explain it as it is plain to see. He will say, look here now. But until he says it is plain to see, there was no such interpretation. Regarding belief, it exists. Yes, we believe, but we do not know the content. But what is here? We see that by using the book of the universe and sciences. Why are sciences important here? Because, in reality, they provide us with the correct grammar rules for interpreting the Quran. Otherwise, the book of the universe cannot be read without grammar. But when these grammar rules are used and it is read absolutely perfectly, there is no longer any doubt, no questioning of, is it really so? For example, hieroglyphic writings could not be read until a certain year. We could see what was written, but we didn't know if it was cuneiform or not. I always give this example. A man came forward, the French linguist Jean-François Champollion. Then that man, by carefully and meticulously examining the inscriptions on the Rosetta Stone, he found the solution. Suddenly, almost everything about Egyptian civilization, down to their recipes, was revealed. Until that day, we knew nothing. Afterwards, Alan Gardner prepared the book Egyptian Grammar. Until a certain year, the writings couldn't be properly read. We didn't know until then what was happening, what was going on, but once it was deciphered. A man found it, a linguist. He deciphered the cuneiform script. Now the question is this. If you say, how do we know this cuneiform script will be read with this man's code? Maybe there's another code. Maybe it tells a story. Does that seem plausible? Because almost even a recipe has come out. I mean, with this decoding solution, so many details have emerged. Could so many accurate details come out with such an error? Could it be read in another way? No, it cannot be read in another way. It's contrary to logic and reason, isn't it? If someone else comes up and says, could it be? You'd say, come on, man. By now, who knows what they've done, which seas they've crossed? Then who came, who set this trap? What recipes are there? Where did they bring water from? And so on. Every detail is written, but you say, what if the professor found it wrong? Can't it be read another way? No, it can't be read another way. Common sense is the same for everyone. This is it, there's nothing else. Would you take it seriously if anyone said it? You'd say, it's already logically unreasonable. The same code, a cuneiform script, can't be read with 3 or 5 different codes. It has one code. Once you set it, you need to read it immediately. That's it. A second code is unthinkable. The number of atoms in the universe is not enough. I mean, for a separate story to emerge with a different code. Did I explain this? This isn't related to that thing. This is what I want to say. Therefore, the book of the universe is also read with one code, the faith code. And when it's read perfectly. I mean, the faith code provides everything related to the universe, almost down to a recipe. Did I explain this? It gives every detail and provides it in perfect harmony. It explains perfectly. It provides matters related to creation. You might ask, does it give me a formula? Like Einstein. It does that, but it's something related to your mathematics. If you have your mathematics, you can establish it. Mathematics is an intermediate language. When you say mathematics, it is not something that perfectly represents what is in nature. Because your mathematics is an amateur study compared to God's mathematics. Since the mathematics here is your mathematics, this is your problem. The Quran has placed that problem on you. You should approach Allah's mathematics. You should eliminate the errors in events. In other words, try to solve them perfectly. But the current mathematics is naturally based on axioms. And science uses only a small part of this. Not everything that is potential in mathematics is used in science. That's the case. Mathematics, as a science, is not an issue that has already entered the literature. In this matter, it serves as an interface. After emphasizing this, I will continue from the it is plain to see part in power. In other words, we see it with our eyes. It is clearly evident to see that in every age within this world, an all-powerful one of glory creates a new, traveling, orderly universe. In other words, he invents an orderly, traveling universe. In every century, every year perhaps, even every day, he creates a new orderly world. Perhaps every day there is a new orderly world. This means that a serious multiplication is happening here. It's like the art of marbling. I say, I'm expressing it very simply though. You know how they drop something into the water? Like ink. Then, to create some patterns on it, on the water, colorful things are placed, and so on. At the same time, a paper is passed over it perfectly. This is the perfect place our Ottoman art has reached. After that, it's an extraordinary art, a delicate art. But then, the water and the thing are always there, but that paper captures the image just once. After that, perhaps in the universe, there's always this matter of capturing an image. There's continuous production of a new universe, and through consciousness, the universe, Risale-i will delve into the topic, providing it in depth. There's continuous production of a new universe through consciousness. And that this is connected to consciousness, I mean, quantum theory, quantum particle fields, the theory of particle fields, they call it quantum field theory. But we call it the theory of particle fields, because a particle field and field are the same matter. Field is the same matter in English. We actually say that this is a field. Field can be in construction, in a building. However, this is not a building construction matter, it's more like a grain field. If there is going to be an emergence from it, it's correct to prefer it as a grain field. In the Risale-i, it is already referred to as a field. In this matter, as the field of particles. Do you know what this field of particles is connected to? When quantum field theories were first discovered, at the initial point before field theory, it was connected to consciousness along with Schrödinger equations in this matter. However, with its connection to consciousness, naturally, objections arose in the scientific field. Why should there be a need for consciousness in this measurement issue? There are 1,000 different names for what we call measurement. Essentially, it was about photons and such, but the great minds, the great physicists who first dealt with this subject, definitely connected it to consciousness. Later on, even though they said, consciousness might not be necessary, it could be this way or that way, it wasn't tied to a specific point. They just didn't want to say the issue is solely due to consciousness. If there is no consciousness, if there is no selector, the universe is in a state, friends, of superposition. The issue collapses into whatever you perceive it as. And it's timeless, meaning there's no speed of light limit. There's the issue we call entanglement. Instantly in the fields, these fields, for example, there are theoretical physics narrators, award-winning physicists. They say these fields are entangled. In other words, they say they are tangled. So, the speed of light is not a limit. So, the issues we call vast fields are matters that encompass the universe. And it means that the issue collapses all at once. Think of it like the art of marbling, a measurement, a new page, a measurement, another new page, a measurement like a new processing art. So, there is a production through consciousness, but scientists say not to link it to consciousness. They try to dilute and diversify the matter by saying the Copenhagen interpretation or other interpretations and so on. Consciousness not denied. Consciousness is still not being denied. But it was a measuring device, this and that. But the thing is, cats and dogs can't make measuring devices. There's no other creature we know of. If there's a measuring device somewhere, it was made by humans. So there's no need for nonsense. They present it in such a way as if aliens, without our knowledge, or some holes, trees, grass, stones, are also making measuring devices. After all, a measuring device is a result of consciousness. No matter what, this ultimately involves a conscious state. I'm addressing those who say that since measurement will eventually be done with a measuring device, it doesn't need to be an eye. We still look at the physicists who first said this. Those who first said this all linked it to consciousness, but they saw that it was leading to a religious point. Because when you link it to consciousness, you place humans in a central position for humans. Was I able to explain the interpretation of the vast universe? Indeed, the findings have shown this. They immediately said, but measurement means this, essentially that. The impact of photons on the eye, and so on, they said. But is there still a result? No. Is there still a result? No. In other words, they don't have a final result. They still haven't been able to take it from humans and place it correctly. Anyone who wants to can look into this. In Roger Penrose's Closer to Truth issue, he calls this wrong. or on the Theories of Everything channel, there are extensive statements. He says this is wrong. He doesn't say it's incomplete for quantum mechanics. He says he won't use polite words like Einstein. He says it's wrong. He says he won't say incomplete. He says wrong. He attributes the reason for this to it. Because it's very clear right now that it shouldn't be connected to consciousness, but it appears to be. However, the result is connected to consciousness. The issue is connected to consciousness, in other words. So there's nothing to hem and haw about here. There's no definition of what consciousness is. Let me also say this. There's no complete definition. In fact, Roger Penrose, together with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, who works in the field of psychology, there's a field related to the nerves of the brain in neuroscience. In the field of neuroscience. Together with that gentleman, they revealed that the issue we call microtubules operates in the form of quantum mechanics, that our brain is in superposition, and when it makes a decision or transitions from superposition to a normal position, it works like quantum mechanics, specifically the microtubules of the brain. Scientists found this light, but this is serious progress, because there is evidence it matches the data. The man is not talking nonsense. What I mean to say is, all of this is in the Risale-i. The Risale-i doesn't need advertising, but these exist. I mean, there is a continuous production of a new universe through consciousness. Can I explain this? There is a constant production. This universe is prepared for this. Its infrastructure, its superstructure, and through consciousness, positions are continuously taken like the art of marbling. I mean, look here, it says regularly in every century. It is taken every year. Maybe it is taken every day. I mean, these sheets have different dimensions. So, it has created an issue in a different dimension in superposition, because let me put it this way, this original universe is a multidimensional universe. It is made only to produce simpler universes. The original is very superior. Did I explain it well? That's the issue. That's why valuable universes are produced from this field we see. So, those who belittle this world, those who belittle this universe, and see it as insignificant compared to the hereafter are mistaken at this point. But craftsmanship here is very high, because the hereafter is produced here. The realms of the hereafter are simpler. They are more subtle. They are eternal, but not like the matters here. This needs to be pointed out. We need to recognize the craftsmanship here. In fact, a new orderly world is created every day. Look, in every century, every year, every month, every day, maybe every hour. Let me add that. A new world is created, I mean. Indeed. He perpetually creates and changes with perfect wisdom transient worlds and universes one after the other on the face of the heavens and the earth. In other words, at the pinnacle of sciences, from wherever the sciences originate, from its peak. He creates and changes. He hangs on the string of time regular worlds to the number of the centuries, years, indeed, days, and through them demonstrates the tremendousness of his power. 100,000 embroideries of resurrection. In other words, not just one kind. He shows 100,000 types of resurrection in this world. For those who look carefully, these can be seen. He attaches to the head of the globe the huge, beautiful flower of spring which he adorns with 100,000 embroideries of resurrection as though it was a single flower. In other words, the highest peak of his wisdom, the greatest degrees. Of course, you can also think of this as the name of a level that sciences will reach 300 trillion years later. You can think of it as its name. If these sciences rise towards the great throne from here, you can speak of the perfection of his wisdom, so to speak. But I'm not saying that the craftsmanship found and achieved by the people here is bad. It's a step, in other words. A big step for humans, but a small step for divine wisdom. But it is a big step for those people. Did I explain this well? However, it is important because it will provide the measure. So what happens now? You start to understand divine wisdom through measurement, when you begin to elevate this towards a great throne. In terms of Allah's wisdom, or rather, where the sciences come from and where they are headed, you can understand this by discovering these sciences. Otherwise, you would never understand in life. It would only remain like this. The Almighty is one and performs all actions at once. That's it. We believe in this. We believe and affirm. That's it. But now, you learn the style of interpreting the universe's book of the Almighty and interpret the Quran with correct grammar rules. You are interpreting the attribute of God. You are learning who God is. Did I explain this clearly? Considering the point humanity has reached, I'm saying that the Risale-i has broken new ground on this topic for the first time. In previous commentaries, this topic was only briefly covered in 2 to 3 lines or half a page, because there was no data, no information, or no subject matter to delve into regarding this topic. They don't even have ideas about the roots of second-degree equations. How could they possibly solve these issues, delve into these matters, establish differential equations, and grasp these issues? It's not possible. Can it be said of such a one, how can he bring about the resurrection of the dead, and how can he transform this world into the hereafter? It cannot be said. If you properly establish the differential equations of power, which is possible today. In fact, significant progress has been made in this area with quantum particle fields. Right? The issue of resurrection starts to become visible. You might say, hey, wait a minute. This isn't a sequential process. It's happening everywhere all at once.